Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to many of you, but good morning to all. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Claudine Collins onto the show this week.
Morning.
So I've known Claudine for 8 years. Sorry, I'll just do a bit faster. So I've known Claudine for, I think, about 8 years. Claudine will correct me if I'm wrong. And whenever I speak with Claudine, I'm always left feeling uplifted. And I'm sure that today will be exactly the same for all of you. For our regulars, you'll know that the point of difference of this show, because I know there's many out there, is to show a bit more vulnerability and authenticity and a bit less perfection. And for those who have read the book and know the reference, it's about a child's adventure through a wonderland. But it talks to the fact that you can be successful, brilliant, happy, fulfilled, but not every day. And so this show sort of mirrors that. And Claudine is bang on brand in that regard, with huge energy and humility in equal measure. So by day, Claudine is Chief Client Officer at Mediacom UK, which is a massive role, given that they've got over 200 clients and biggest spenders in the land. Fortunately, Claudine's got lots of experience to draw upon, having spent 25 years in the media industry, but to define Claudine by a day job would overlook so many other incredible things that she's done. Perhaps most notably, and we'll hear more about this, Claudine is a regular on The Apprentice show, and I think probably personal friends with Sir Alan Sugar, or Lord Sugar, sorry. She's one of the interviewers who whittled down those last few to the two finalists, which I'm sure is going to be fascinating to hear a bit about. But she also does a huge amount from a charity perspective, from the Prince's Trust to Lord Taverners to Rays of Sunshine Children's Charity. And also have to say personally, I benefited from Claudine's generosity since she helped me to get the Sprintathon off the ground in 2016. And as you might know, Claudine has offered a mentoring session as a prize to one of our lucky winners today. So Claudine, it's fabulous to have you on the show, and you know, I'm so grateful that you're going to give us your time this morning. And so I'm going to hand over to Richie to explain how the prize works, and then get us started with questions. So very welcome, Claudine.
Thank you.
And good morning to everyone on the show as well. Claudine, thank you so much for being on this morning. So guys, look, what a rare opportunity to win a little bit of time with Claudine. Claudine, I really genuinely wish that I could win this prize, because it'd be great to spend a little bit of time with you and get some of your insights. But look, I can't, and somebody on the show this morning is going to be able to do that. Now, very, very simple. What I'd like you to do today is to actually Google Claudine, and there's going to be so many great images and quotes and videos of her that I'd like you to actually put one of those onto LinkedIn, copy me and Mark in, and then we will announce the winner next week. So look, without further ado, I'd love to get into the questions, Claudine. So first question up is, how has the last couple of months been for you?
I was just going to say, please be really careful what picture you put up of me in Google. I'm sure there are too many that I don't want up there. So the last couple of months. Okay, if we go back to lockdown, I suppose I've never been somebody that's worked from home. I haven't liked the thought of it. Whenever I have worked from home, I've always been easily distracted. And so when lockdown happened, and I've also, as Mark will know, I'm a very sociable person. So actually my work really fits in with my passions and my loves, and I'm seeing clients all the time, and I'm out with them all the time, and I'm either in their offices or, you know, we might be out for lunch or breakfast or something, and I go out in the evenings quite a lot to industry events. So to suddenly be locked down, my first thought was, oh my God, how on earth am I going to connect with my clients from my dining room table? You know, I live in a small flat. Luckily, it was just me and my husband at the time, so the stepchildren couldn't really come over. But, you know, I didn't have a proper setup. I didn't have a chair, didn't have the computer. And so to cut a very long story short, it was awful for the first few weeks. I didn't know really what to do with myself. I didn't like talking through a screen. I wasn't used to it. Didn't feel I was coming across particularly well. And then I suppose I got my head into gear and thought to myself, okay, I have to think of a way, I have to come up with a strategy that is going to connect my clients, because I think we're going to be here for quite a long while. And up until about 2 months ago, if you'd have asked me how was lockdown, I would have said, oh, it was awful, right? You know, I couldn't see my parents, but then lots of people couldn't see their parents, and you know, and I thought it was awful. But then honestly, I took hold of myself and I realized how really lucky I was, you know, because I was still lucky to be in a job, because there were lots of people around me that were losing their jobs. My family, thank goodness, were healthy, right? I had come up with a strategy to connect with my clients, which was working. And actually, I could see the benefits of working part-time from home, but also was looking forward to going back to the office. And, you know, I have had to, whenever anyone asked me, how's it been? I have just said I've been very lucky during it, because I think if you haven't been ill, if you haven't known anyone really close to you or your family that have been ill, you've got your job and you're able to do a good enough job. I think you've been very lucky. And now I'm going back to the office a couple of times a week. I can definitely see the benefits of hybrid working from home, working from the office, which I've never done before.
Claudine, already coming across, you are one of the most optimistic people I've ever met, and you probably need to be, because you're dealing with 200 clients. Sometimes you can be a bit sort of pissy, and hopefully we're not one of them.
No, you're not.
But where does that abundant energy come from? Is there an origin or a source for that?
I think I've always been, I've always realised that I've been very lucky in my life, and if I went through my life, if I'm honest, there are times when I haven't been very lucky, but overall, I think I have been very lucky, and I love my life. And so I'm always grateful, and I just think, things come at you, and you can either just wallow into a hole, or you just have to think to yourself, I'm gonna deal with this head on. I'm gonna get over it, because you do get over things, and I'm just going to move forward. And I try and see the positive in everything and in everyone. And I think actually one of the reasons that I got this role is, as you say, not all clients are as lovely as you, Mark, and we have had to deal with some very, very difficult clients. But I think the thing that I see that not many other people see is I'll always put myself in their shoes, and I'll always think, well, if that was my money, or if my boss was giving me a hard time like their boss is giving me a hard time, I'd want someone to really help me and understand what I'm going through. And so I do. And generally, if you deal with people in that way, they're very grateful to you. And I've ended up having friends out of that have been the most difficult clients, renowned in the industry, and I've ended up being quite friendly with them. But then you see, I get to a point where I can tell them they're being really difficult, and I can also tell them that I think they're out of order when they might have behaved in a way that isn't conducive to how we want to work with our clients, and they will take it.
Claudine, that's great. And Claudine, you mentioned that there have been times when you haven't been so lucky. Perhaps can you elaborate on maybe one or two of those moments, and particularly how you were able to overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, I think, my parents got divorced when I was 10. I didn't really realise, I think, the effect that would have on me, because my parents got divorced when I was 10. They did not have a good relationship post that divorce. They both got married to other people 2 years later. I also had to have an operation when I was 14, which led me to taking a year out of school. It was I went to a very academic school, and I did well, but I was definitely midway. I wasn't one of the brightest, and I had to work really, really hard to get to where I was. And then I suppose during my career there, which I'm sure we're going to come on to, there have been a few bumps there as well, and being really honest, I still found myself very lucky, but when I got to the age of 40 and I wasn't married and I didn't have children, to me, I'd been brought up, if I'm honest, to just assume I was going to get married and have children. And all I wanted to do was I wanted to be a mum. So at the beginning, I wasn't even really interested in having a career. I thought I'll have a job until I meet somebody, and then I'm going to be a mum, because my mum was working, right? So my mum worked, she had her own business, she worked weekends. And my auntie, who lived around the corner, she had 4 children, and she was constantly cooking and looking after them. And I suppose in my early years, I thought, well, I want to be like my Auntie Pauline. Obviously, in later years, I am so proud of my mum. She was like well before her time, and like I absolutely idolise her. But you know, that's what I wanted to do. So when I got to 40 was like a big blocker for me. I thought it was never going to happen for me. So I kind of had a bit of a I don't know what you would call it. I didn't go into a depression, but it wasn't a great time for me. But then I just had to pick myself up and think to myself, look how lucky I am. You know, there are so many people that are so much worse off than me. But it was a little blip. But yeah, I gave myself. I normally, when I'm feeling a bit low about something, I will allow myself 1, possibly 2, if it's a really horrible thing, to allow myself 2 days to wallow in it. And then I think, right, by day 3, I'm waking up, I'm not having this attitude, and I'm getting on with it. And that normally works.
I love it. A 3-day rule.
Yeah, 3-day rule.
Very good, very good. But you did say something before about you found a way to do that sort of connection thing, which is so important to your job. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what practically does that mean to connect with so many people and maintain so many relationships?
I think it's, you know what, it comes from an interest in people, Mark. So if you don't have an interest in people, you can't really force it. I find people fascinating, and, you know, I generally do, people that I meet that I just like, or I know I really actually care about them. You know, I'm not being funny. You could phone me at 2 o'clock in the morning and say to me, I need you for something, and I would be there, right? So there are very few people that I wouldn't help if they needed to. But I do remember a new client that we had, and I still remember it now, and he was talking about his children, and it was like Jamie, Ella and Cassie, and I literally ran to the toilet. I put in my phone, right, Jamie, Ella and Cassie. And the next time I saw him, I said to him, oh, how's Jamie getting on, and Ella and Cassie? And I think he was so shocked that I'd remembered their names that we just had a connection, and he just kind of completely relaxed. And I'll talk obviously about work when I see the clients, but I also talk about stuff I'm up to, and it kind of relaxes them, and they'll talk about their family. And so that, and generally I will keep in touch with people regularly because I am interested, and I do genuinely care about their business and care about them, and want to know how things are. And if things aren't good, I'm a fixer. My mum will always say I'm a fixer. If I can't fix anything, I go into a terrible mood. Luckily, I now have my husband who fixes things around the house, because I definitely can't do that. But I try and fix other things that are not going so well.
Claudine, you've already given us so many great nuggets here. I mean, the 3-day rule, what you just said now about caring and then being a fixer, I mean, it just really encapsulates what you're about. Would you mind joining some of the dots of your career? How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Well, it's quite interesting actually, because I started so as I told you, I was at a very academic school, and I did really well in my O levels, and I did really well in my A levels, and I wasn't really expecting to, because my school was a school that would say to you, which you would never do now, I don't think, but it was always, you're not good enough to be able to do that. So I wanted to go to university to do journalism. No, you're not good enough at English to do that. I wanted to go to university then to do law. No, you won't be able to do that. You should go and do a retail course at somewhere like John Lewis or Marks and Spencer's. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Anyway, so I really didn't know what to do. And I went to do an advertising course, only because I went to the careers library, had no idea what I was going to do. And I started at A, and it was AC accountancy. Oh, no, boring. AD advertising. Well, I can't draw, so that's not good. And then right at the bottom, it said, well, if you're not creative or you can't draw, but you're good with people and you're good at maths and you're good at this, there was a course at Watford College, which was about 15 minutes away from where I lived. And I thought, you know what, I'll apply to that. You know, it's round the corner. I'll see whether I like that or not. So anyway, I did that, and again I left there and I went for my first interview, which was at Saatchi & Saatchi, And I remember it was with a woman called, never forget her name, Sheila Bowden. And she absolutely scared the life out of me. In this interview, she was like a Rottweiler. And I came out and I thought, I'm not working in enough advertising. And I remember saying it to my parents, and they went, okay, enough. We've sent you to a really good school. You've done really well. You are not going to amble around from place to place, from course to course. You just need to get a job now. So I thought, well, what I'll do is, because it knocked my confidence, I thought I'm going to start in an advertising agency as a secretary. So I did. I started as a receptionist stroke secretary, but it was in the era of, and I'm sure a lot of your people listening in just won't believe this happened, but it did, where bosses used to come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, they'd work till 1, and then they'd go to the pub or restaurant and you'd never see them again. And unbelievably, I know I'm old, there were no mobile phones. So after about 3 weeks of being there, one of my bosses came in and said, oh, I don't know, I can't do this drinking, going out and drinking lark anymore. And the other guy said, why not? He said, because I'm doing all these plans and I don't remember doing them. And I said, no, it was me. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, didn't you see on my CV, I went to Watford College, I did an advertising course. I said, clients are ringing up at 3 o'clock saying they need their plan by 5. I have no idea where you are or how to get hold of you. I said, so I just did it and sent it over to them and they've been signed off. And he just went, right, get a new receptionist secretary, come upstairs and work with me. So it was a small media independent, but I definitely learned my spurs like there, definitely. And I started negotiating press space. And I was there for 5 years. And as I told you at the beginning, I wasn't really a career girl. I was very proud of my work and I loved it. But I never thought about necessarily climbing the ladder, because I just kept thinking, at the time I must have been about 22 or 23, well, I'm going to get married at some point and have children. So, you know, what is the point? I love it here and this is great. Anyway, what actually happened was I was there for about 4 years. It was a very small company. They lost a very big client. At the same time, I got headhunted by the biggest agency in the UK, which is now MEC, but was CIA, to go and be a group head in their press department or direct response department. And I just said no. And when my original agency lost this client, they said they were going to have to make redundancies. And there was a woman there who was a single mother with 2 children. And I said to my boss, who I got on very well with, are you going to have to let this lady go? And he said, yes, I'm not letting you go, but I'm going to let her go. And I said, if I willingly go, will you keep her? And he said, yes. And he said, but I don't want you to go. I said, well, I've been approached. It's not right. I've been approached by another company. I will go. You can keep her. And he said, what company is it? And I said, CIA. And he said, well, I love you. You have to go. He said, it's a career defining decision, this. He said, it will put you on the map. You have to, I'm telling you, as someone that cares for you, you have to go. So I left and I went and worked at CIA for 2.5 years, where I met Karen Blackett and some of the other greats actually in media. And I was a group head there for 2.5 years. And then I got headhunted by the media business to go and work there. And I started there really as a press buyer, like a press group head. And I ended up becoming the head of press, and was probably the best job of my life. And then I became head of investment. When I was head of investment, I didn't love it, and I'm sure we'll come on to that kind of in a bit. And I started then, because I'd never really dealt with clients before. I'd only ever dealt with media owners, and in a way I was the client to the media owner, so I never had to deal with clients. But we had a couple of very tricky clients in the agency, and Nick Lawson, who at the time was our CEO, said to me, go and sort them out, Claude. So I did. And when I had a real conversation with him, because I had got headhunted to go somewhere else, and I am a true MediaCom person through and through, I said to him, I'm leaving because I really don't like this role and you're not really listening to me. He then kind of said, right, okay, you know what? You really need to be the managing director. He said, because you are brilliant with clients and we have never realized that before. And you need to be doing a lot more client stuff. So I ended up being the managing director for 7 years, which I loved. But for various reasons, well, one of which was I got married and had 3 stepchildren. My mother became ill, and Satin Reed, who worked for me, is just absolutely brilliant. And I thought, well, I'm standing in her way because really she should be the managing director. And I've done it for 7 years now. I said to Josh, who was the CEO at the time, you know, I think I want to do less about codes and HR stuff, and I actually want to concentrate on being a client person. And I want Satin to be able to move up and me not be a blocker for her. And maybe, hasn't quite worked out this way, I have a bit more spare time that I can kind of spend, and I'm not doing quite as much long hours doing this. So anyway, so I became Chief Client Officer, and that was about a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago.
Wow.
So that's joining all the dots.
Amazing story and pathway. It's so great example of good things happen to good people. But you've mentioned a couple of moments where you've not self-sacrificed, but you've put others before you, but it's turned into something even better. Is that something that is there a philosophy behind some of those decisions that you've made?
Yeah, look, when I was 16, right, when I was 16, I went to a lovely school. You know, I hadn't ever really come across anyone that had had anything awful or traumatic happen to them. Maybe I was 16, maybe I wouldn't. But my school, and I have to thank them, I didn't really like my school very much, I have to be honest, but I have to thank them for this. They put a thing together that after school you could help out. It was a scheme called FAB, and it was physically handicapped and able-bodied. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm a very lucky person, and I'm going to help out. And it was such an eye-opener to see these kids that were my age, you know, in wheelchairs, that were physically and mentally handicapped. And I just thought to myself, I want to be able to try and make their lives better. You know, they're never going to have a life like me, and maybe they are happy themselves, I don't know, but I just really want to try and do something. So I've spent my whole life trying to do that for various people. You know, when I got to, I think, 18 and I left school, I went and worked for the Variety Club. So a friend of mine's dad was the chief barker at Variety Club, and he said, look, we've got a junior version, kind of like the young Variety Club, and maybe you'd like to do some work for them. And I met all these fantastic people, lots of whom I am still friendly with today. And it's one of their birthdays today, but they're really friendly with. And we used to do fundraising events to raise motorized wheelchairs for the kids, to get, buses so that they could go out for the day. And so, yes, so I've always thought I'll be okay. And I, you know, as I said, with this woman, I thought she won't be okay. You know, as at the time she was older, she was a woman, which counted against her. At the time, she had 2 kids and was trying to balance that. And I just thought, I'll be okay. I'll find something and I'll be okay, but she won't. So yeah, I thought, well, I'll take that job. And obviously it was the best thing that happened. I mean, it was 2 years that I really didn't like, but it got me to where I needed to be.
Claudine, I think the thing that strikes me is the role of karma that plays in some of these sort of decisions, and I really admire that you take those tough decisions and sacrifice in so many ways. We've got a question from Phil McSweeney. So Phil is actually a great member of our community, and he's always on the show. So thanks, Phil, for being on. So he asks, which entrepreneurs do you really admire, and what do you admire about them? What qualities about some entrepreneurs turn you off as well?
Okay. Oh, good question. So obviously I know Alan Sugar, Lord Sugar, quite well. And I will say that on the surface, he's very grumpy, and he's very grumpy, but he's, I think, very shy. Right, he is actually very shy. I respect him because he did start with nothing. He really did start with nothing. And something I learned when I interviewed him last week is that he kind of makes out that he left school with no qualifications, went on a market stall, started like that, then started his computer stuff. But actually, he was very clever. He said he's a scientist, right? And he loved chemistry and physics and biology. And he started making this like little computer when he was younger. And, you know, because honestly, for a long time I thought, oh, he had a lot of luck in it, which he probably did. Everybody has a bit of luck. But no, I actually, you know, I actually thought to myself, I've got a lot of time for you. And also what he does do, listen, he holds no punches, right? So he'll say exactly what he thinks. When I was doing the questions, I said to him, shall I send them over to you? He goes, nah, don't bother. He goes, if I don't want to answer it, I won't answer it. If I don't like the question, you'll know, don't bother sending him over. I said, okay, fine. You know, he doesn't give a toss about anything. And you'll see on his Twitter, he'll just go, oh, you idiot, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't like speak like that, but he's incredibly charitable. And I think people are constantly having a go at his wealth and, you know, and saying, oh, well, it's all right for you. And they're always thinking that he's evading his taxes. He pays a fortune in taxes and he gives a lot to charity. And honestly, the fact that I asked him to give an hour of his time, he was only in England for, I think, 5 days, had loads to do, but he was just straight away like, yeah, sure, if it'll help you out, you know, I'll do it. So I do respect him. What I don't like is I don't like when first of all, I don't like when any entrepreneur or businessman treats their staff badly, and I'm sure we've all read about some people like that. I don't like when they're just flashing their wealth everywhere. You know, good luck to them. If they made it themselves, then good luck to them. But it doesn't mean when you're going through like the worst time, which we have been, you know, lying, taking pictures of yourself, lying on your yacht I don't like that. I think keep it, you know, good luck to you, but keep it to yourself and have a bit of sensitivity for other people. So yeah.
Since you mentioned Lord Sugar and The Apprentice, couldn't not ask the question about what's it like actually working with him, but that whole process, you know, there's always so much that goes on behind the scenes, behind the camera. Give us an insight to what that experience is like.
Oh, it's a bit intimidating, even for me. So it's, you know, we all have our roles. I think I'm not as good as the others in the interviews, because obviously you've got Linda, who is again like a Rottweiler and gets all the headlines, because she's just like, oh, you're talking rubbish, all this, all that, you know. And then you've got Claude, who just can nail them. You have Mike, who's very cleverly, and I always wonder when Mike does his thing and he says, and he pushes a piece of paper across the table and he says, so this is unique, is it? You think to yourself, surely you've watched the show and you know he does this every time and you know it's not unique. So your best bet is to go, well, no, it's not, you know, this happened. And they all go, yeah, it's unique. And then he just nails them. And then my role in it is to really get under the skin of them as people, because there have been people that Lord Sugar's really liked. And, you know, he's not allowed to sway us in any way. So we're not allowed to talk to him before the interviews at all. But we get to hear, look, he really likes this person. And I'll say, well, reading through their CV, they're talking a lot of rubbish. And then I'll meet them and I will think, you are just here for the ratings. You just want to be famous. You are not interested in in setting up a business. Your business is rubbish anyway. And then we have to go back and we have to report back to him. And sometimes he doesn't like what we have to say. And he's like, well, I really like that person. And we're like, well, you're going to make a mistake. But, you know, when you go into that boardroom, even though you're not the one that's in the hot seat or vying for it, it is really intimidating. And he comes in and he, you know, he sits there and he does his thing. And then I'll go, no, that was rubbish. Why are you changing the camera roll now? I'm right in the middle of doing something, you know, and you're all sitting, me, Claude and Sue, me, Claude and Mike and Linda are just sitting there like, oh, okay, we'll just keep quiet. He's not happy with them. That's fine. But yeah, it's really hard work though. It is really hard work. I have 9 boxes that I have to go through, which is their application forms, CVs, business plans. I have to read through all of them with a fine-tooth comb, and I have to probably prepare 60 questions per 9 candidates, which then get whittled down to 5, but only the day before. So you have to, it's honestly a week of evenings and during the day out of my time to prepare for it.
Wow. Claudine, well, to be honest, it doesn't show on the show because I watch it every
Good.
Absolutely brilliant. You come across so elegantly.
Thank you.
Fantastic. We have another question from the audience. Raju Nair actually is in Saudi, in Jeddah.
Oh, wow.
And so he's got a question for you. So he says, hi, Claudine. He's actually a great member of our community as well. I can relate to your career profile. How does one pivot to this new digital and tech era without the ageism barrier impacting one and still being very relevant?
So I think that if you can, it's a really good question. It is a really good question. I think that you just have to immerse yourself in it, right? And I actually think, and you know what, I probably should have done it myself and probably should have done it myself in lockdown, if I'm honest, because it would have been a good opportunity to do it, but everyone was kind of whirring around. I think that if I could have taken, you know, just a few weeks out of my diary and literally immersed myself and spoken to all the people, like our head of digital, our head of data, put something together and just learnt it myself, I think that would put you in really good stead. And I just think you have to have your brain like a sponge, and you have to just take everything, and you have to ask questions, because you know there are so many people. I mean, we were in a meeting the other day and I said, sorry, I don't know what that means, and I like 6 other people, like, and I think the person said, does everyone not know what it means? And most people went, yeah, no, I don't know what it means. And I thought, God, if I hadn't said anything, we'd all be sitting here like idiots, like not having a clue what it meant. And because people think, oh, I should know, especially if you're older, they think, oh, well, you're senior, you should know. But actually, you should just get on and learn about it, and then you have to do it. So we did a thing at MediaCom where we went back to the shop floor, and this is when we were in offices. Or actually, that's something would be a bit more difficult to do remotely. And I would go and sit with the social team, and I'd spend kind of like a day or a couple of days, you know, with them, really experiencing what they're doing, kind of myself setting up a campaign. And I was just like, oh my goodness, do you go through this every time you have to set up a campaign? This is ridiculous. I used to phone up the guy at the Sun and go, hi, can you book a page for me, please? Make sure it's on page 5. No, thanks very much. Yeah, I'll pay this. Goodbye. Right. This was like, oh, this campaign, there was so much room for error as well. I couldn't believe it, which actually changed quite a lot, because I went back and said, God, this has to be automated. This is absolutely crazy. So you kind of have to do it as well. You have to ask if you can go and work in certain departments or places or whatever. But I would just say, read everything you can, ask as many questions as you can, and immerse yourself. And actually, if you can do it, you have the advantage of experience and being in the moment, understanding it. That's a really powerful combination to have.
Just you did tee it up a bit before, Claudine. You mentioned about a darker day in the head of investment job, or the job you really didn't enjoy. So I'd love to hear a bit more about what you didn't enjoy and how you dealt with that.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a learning for me, Mark, because and I can kind of say this now, okay, at the time I was absolutely the best press director in the country, right? And people would say it, but I was, and I knew I was. I knew I was a complete expert. People would not launch national magazines if I said it wouldn't work. You know, I remember I had the managing director of The Sun phone me up and said, we're thinking of revamping Fabulous magazine. Will you come in with the editor and we'll go through it with you? And I said, yes. And they took me through it and I said, no, that won't work. That won't work. You need to do this, you need to do that. And they changed it according to what I said. So I loved that job. I knew everybody. I went over and above. You know, as I saw other press directors catching me up, I thought, right, how am I going to differentiate myself? So I thought, right, I'm going to get to know all the editors, right? And that was a game changer because I got to know all of the editors. And so when I'd get a call from the sales director saying to me, oh, sorry, editor won't put it on page 5. I say, well, we'll see about that, won't we? And I'll phone up the editor and I'll say, why aren't you putting it on page 5? And he'd say, well, you know, we've got this big news story coming in. And I'd just smooth him and say, come on, I need it on page 5. And because I knew him or her, 90% of the time I'd be able to get it sorted, or I'd get positions and sizes that never existed that they would allow me to do. So when our head of TV left, well, what happened was we could see that digital was coming up before, and I was saying to my head of TV, this is a bit ridiculous that we have very siloed buying units. You've got the press unit, you've got the TV unit, we've got a digital unit. I said, what happens when, for example, Channel 4 go digital? How's that going to work with you and the digital team? So anyway, we decided we were putting all the teams together, we were going to combine them. We went to Nick Lawson, who's the CEO at the time. He explained our view. He said, yes, absolutely. And he made myself and the head of TV joint heads of investment. Obviously, what happened was everyone that worked in TV just went to him to ask his opinion on stuff. And everyone that worked in press came to me. I then kind of, by just osmosis, kind of took on outdoor. He took on radio. So it was still kind of siloed in a leadership point of view. And then he left and I took the whole lot over. And this is my own insecurity, right? I just thought, well, I don't know TV. I just don't understand TV. And his number 2, who I think had wanted to be the head of TV, didn't make it easy for me. So he used to come in and ask me very technical questions, which obviously I didn't have a clue what to do. And I kind of floundered with that. And I remember saying to Jane Ratcliffe, I don't like this job. I said, I feel if you're going to be head of a department, you have to know more than everybody that works for you. And she said, well, that isn't true. She said, if you're going to be a leader, you're there to be a leader, and you have people that work for you that know kind of the intricacies of things. But I couldn't grasp that. I just couldn't grasp it. And I think it didn't help that I had a few people in the team that were not happy that I'd taken over this big role, and that they were having, and I don't know whether it was reporting into a woman or what it was, but they just weren't happy. So they made it quite difficult. So I just didn't enjoy it. You know, I didn't enjoy it. And in hindsight, if I was going to talk to myself like back then now, I would be saying exactly what Jane said, which is, you don't need to know. Right, you don't need to know. You just need to know kind of like the overall, you know, the income that comes in. You need to know the deals. You need to know that. You need to know the people, and you need to lead that team. And you can easily lead that team without knowing the intricacies of TV buying.
Well, I think that's actually genuinely really insightful, and thank you for sharing that insecurity. And I think that'd be really helpful for others perhaps going through a similar thing. I know we're coming towards the end, so perhaps if I ask you to keep this next answer brief. It's coming from one of our audience, Chirag Shah, another great member we know well, and he works for Mars. So he's asking perhaps a technical question around media buying, but so he says, what's your view on how COVID will change media consumption going forward, and thus where clients should invest?
Oh, big question.
But perhaps just ask just for a few pointers.
I think really, obviously, digital is going to continue to be massive. You know, online consumption and shopping is where most people are moving and moving at a quicker rate than they would have normally. You know, a lot of my clients, especially smaller clients, said they've been accelerated 2 years forward by this, because otherwise it would have taken them 2 years from a digital point of view to get to where they are. I think newspapers are really suffering, even through their kind of like news brands. I don't necessarily think that there's a good reason why, because their readership is still kind of, you know, that it's still big. TV is interesting because obviously TV viewing went up and became you know, a good place to invest in, but because there have been no new programs that have been made, I think you're going to find that the content is really going to suffer in the next few months and going forward. We were talking to cinema the other day. Cinema is going to, in my opinion, live or die by Bond, by James Bond in November. So if that doesn't get people back into the cinemas, right, properly, then they have a big problem, because I think, you know, lots of people always go and see Bond in the first few things. Outdoor, well, in London is not doing well, because London, as I said, is pretty you know, dead at the moment. But round in other areas, I think is doing it's also suffering. It is suffering. But it should be okay. Like that should come back and be okay. And radio is doing well, because people working at home, you know, often just have the radio on a background. That is doing well. But obviously, it's digital is where it's going.
Thank you, Claudine, for that. That's really insightful.
So, so it is time. Unfortunately, it's gone past in a.
Oh, it's gone so fast.
But I'll hand over to Richie to do an outro. But thank you, Claudine.
Thank you.
You know, I'm not at all surprised that you've been really straightforward, really honest, and shown your vulnerability, and I appreciate that, and I know everyone else will. So, thank you enormously for your time, Claudine.
Thank you so much for asking me. I'm really humbled that you did.
Claudine, you know, I can only echo that, to be honest with you. The one phrase that really stays with me through this conversation, or the one that comes to my mind, is that if you care for others, they will care for you. And I think that's truly what you've done and achieved. And it's been through sort of empathy through your career that you've been able to do that in so many different ways. And that's really, really inspiring to me, and I'm sure to others as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Guys, for everyone in the audience, just so you know, we're obviously back here same time next week, 8 a.m. Next week, we've got I can't even believe I'm saying this, but the Deputy Mayor of London for Business, who's joining us to talk about his career journey, his ups and downs, his vulnerabilities, about he actually started as a tech, fintech entrepreneur, and now, of course, he's serving the City of London. So tune in next week, where you'll be able to hear some of his insights about how he navigated his career. So until then, see you all soon.